Hello and welcome to yet another review. This one will be about S1000RR from BMW model year 2024. This is a third iteration of this K67 models of S1000RR. So the first was released in 2019, when the second iteration started from 2021, and the third iteration, which this bike belongs to, started on 2023, and now we are in 2025, and the fourth iteration of the same, more or less same motorcycle. So in 2025 this bike received shorter throttle, basically whatever you call it, quick throttle, so it's less degrees to full gas, basically to full opening. On this one, however, on this one I cannot complain that it is too long or anything, feels fine to me. Alright, on the fourth iteration, which is from 2025, the different wings in the front, different fairing in the front, different opening for the air duct into the engine, and so small changes, mostly cosmetic, plus the throttle grip twist angle. All the rest of the bike is pretty much the same as this one of third iteration. So let's talk about this one specifically then. So this one has few upgrades on it, but from the factory it came with all the electronics, including DDC, but it didn't, what it's missing forged aluminum wheels. So this one has just a standard cast wheels, and it's missing a Krapovich main part of the exhaust, which are from the engine down to end can. So this one has just a normal stainless steel, its bottom portion of the exhaust, including the headers. So few upgrades I did to this bike. I installed these rear sets, M rear sets, and this, after, well, how to say, the options of upgrades were like M packet versions of rear sets, which look different but also adjustable. And these are M rear sets, and these are like those on the M1000RR. They not as bling bling looking, but I think they're just more practical generically. These rear sets you can fix or have them foldable. If you install a bolt there at the bottom, then they will not be foldable. I also removed the springs from there because I'm running them in a fixed non-foldable configuration. So we come with this gear shift lever, which is adjustable for this specific bolt over here, and also movement of that thing forward and back. It comes, well, it allows for GP shift or standard shift, and it has two positions, the further away one for short throw, and then another one for normal throw, and the same two here for the normal, not a GP shift configuration. I have it in a standard, like first gear down and short throw. So what else do I have here? Yeah, so this chain adjusters are also M. The best part of them is we don't fall off when you remove rear axle. And also nice looking and made from aluminum, not siloamine as the standard ones. Well, here I have M clutch lever and M brake lever over here. Stock clutch lever is kind of okayish. The stock brake lever is just garbage, so that had to go. And I think lever upgrade on this motorcycle is kind of essential, because, as I said, stock parts, especially brake lever, really bad ergonomics, at least for me. And what else? Yeah, I have a Krapovich can on it. It's GP short version, just for looks, a bit less weight and, well, I guess a little bit more sound, but not by much. As from practical, yeah, I also have this M seat, which is the highest version. And the purpose of that was to basically increase the distance between the foot pegs and the seat for, let's say, easier to ride ergonomics. For me, I have long legs and they are old, 49 years old legs, and my knees were like a little bit not very comfortable with a standard foot pegs and a standard seat. So these were installed. And from these seats they come with 3 different sizes. So this is the tallest one, and I'm not really sure if it's available anymore. When there is a medium and the low version as well. I think medium and low still available widely. So from a very practical one, technical upgrades, I have this 2D sensor installed for front suspension, because this is a DDC bike. And we all know what BMW only equipped with motorcycles with a rear suspension sensor, but the front is optional, and if you want to install it, you have to buy it from somewhere else. So Alpha Racing sells this, and this specific sensor is from 2018 model year bike, which I had some long time ago. So this sensor is like 7 years old already. It still works. I installed it using 2018 installation hardware, but modified. So you can see I fixed it here at the bottom. So I drilled a hole and threaded it, and so that allows for lower one normal installation of a sensor, and that eliminates the need for the steering stops, which usually would be affixed to a frame. And on the street they are not really practical, because you need all your steering angle for U-turns and things like that. On a track, steering stops are not a big problem whatsoever. But my goal is to use this, well, this bike is used mostly for the street, so my goal was to fix this sensor somehow so it would not be hitting the radiator or any plastics on a full lock-to-lock turns. And I did it by this type of mounting. So again, to do the same as I did here, you need to buy the 2018 sensor, because the sensor itself is the same for both models, just different hardware for mounting. The good thing about this one, it has this clamp around the fork, and you can clamp it at like different heights. And the important part is to find the really like true place to drill that hole, and you have only one chance to do it. Because if you get it wrong, when the sensor may be hitting this area over here of bottom fork leg casting, or may not be parallel to the fork. So you need to make sure that it is parallel from all angles to the fork leg, to this, let's say, shiny tube over here. And then that's it. So if you measure 100 times and then drill once, and thread it correctly, use some Loctite for this mounting part. When you just lift the bike, so the front suspension will be completely extended, so I use a stand like this for that, which goes into the bottom triple clamp. You push the wheel down to make sure that it's all completely extended, and then you measure from the bottom square portion of the sensor to the top square portion, 412 millimeters, and you then just tighten the clamp. That's it. Installation done. Well, in the case of falling to the left side, of course, this part will be broken. You can install some kind of an axle protectors wear which would prevent that, something like that. At the moment I don't have plans to fall, and I hope I will not. Well, if I will have to buy a new sensor, I guess. It would be the price for it. But yeah, some crash protectors would kind of save it, I guess, if you want to. And so, yeah, sensor connects under this plastic over here. There is a mounting socket. Well, sorry, there is a socket available for it. And then you just need to kind of mount a wire with a zip ties, so it wouldn't be, just hanging too much. That's about it. As soon as you plug it in, the DDC menu for the race pro riding modes now have adjustable compression and rebound in the front, as it has all the time in the rear. So this sensor allows for the DDC to understand is suspension compressing, at what speed, or rebounding, and at what speed. And so it can do a little bit more precise adjustments in the front comparing to the standard situation where it has no clue what the front suspension is doing, and it uses the same, damping settings all the time. You just can make it harder or softer, but it does not separate compression and rebound stroke because it doesn't know. Okay, so that's about the upgrades. So this bike, as I mentioned, it came with all electronic packages, including steering angle sensor, which is located over here. As you can see on one, it mounts to a bottom triple clamp through this kind of a razor, whatever. It also came with this M chain, which is made by Regina, and it's still, the chain is fine, kind of, not bad, not great, just fine. But it looks okay because it's kind of a golden chain. BMW claims that this is like a super strong, super wear resistance, but we shall see. So far didn't require too much of adjustments actually, which is good. Usually I was using DID ZVMX2 chains on motorcycles like this, but I decided to keep this one because it's fine. Well, what else can be said about this bike? So let's go with it by generic things. Engine is fine. This is European bike, and I know a lot of American friends from USA complain about some missing mid-range on the motorcycle, which probably relates to ECU programming into, to fit into noise regulations in USA, something like that. So this European one, I didn't notice too much of a trouble anywhere. It works fine. In road and dynamic mode, the engine response is kind of a little bit pushed down, I guess, to provide like a safer ride. But in a race pro mode it's much better, and also in a race mode it's much better. And if you go into race pro configuration menu, you can adjust the reaction to a throttle opening. It gives you ability basically to have a direct throttle, to have like optimal with maximum torque or reduced torque, so you can choose it from there. I noticed, to myself, the optimal seems to be the best choice, I guess. Direct is a little bit kind of jerky, a little bit, but also kind of fine. And through the race pro modes you can adjust a lot of things, like, as I mentioned, the reaction to a throttle opening, engine braking, DDC, traction control, anti-wheelie, and ABS parameters. So a lot of customizations are possible through there. So you can set the bike to your riding style or whatever you prefer. Regarding a DDC suspension, what I noticed is, so that's the engine. Let's not talk about suspension yet. So engine. So next thing, brakes. I'm not sure exactly at which model year, at which iteration we started to install this Nissin front calipers. It says BMW, but in reality these are Nissin calipers. If you look over there, you could see it's written Nissin. Because before it used to be two options. Were really bad Hayes calipers in the front, or Nissins, and Nissins were all in blue, and we've been installing those into M1000RR models and also into M package versions of S1000RR. From 2023, I'm sure all of them come with Nissin calipers, just painted in black. Not sure if the change was exactly made in 2023 or before that at some point, but it's good that they got rid of those shitty really bad Hayes calipers in the front and decided to go with a better hardware. However, I would prefer if these brake calipers would be actually made by Brembo and called Stilema or something around that area. But BMW for some reason decided not to go with a Brembo, probably like money reasons, money savings. The front master cylinder is also Nissin, and it suspiciously looks like the one I had on my 2012 model year bike. We're probably still using exactly the same for all this freaking, what, from 2009, and now it's 2025, right? So 16 years. Probably not the best idea. Again, they could have used the Brembo front master cylinder, but, well, again, probably money savings. In the rear situation is even worse, so we use this really old design rear caliper with one piston, and it's sliding on the rods where, you know, this is just a freaking ancient design. You can see the actual brake pad. Oops, static. You can see the brake pad through this side over there. So nobody in the right mind on this type of a motorcycle would use that, because this is just cheap and dumb, but BMW still use it. I think on the 2012 S1000RR, which I had in 2018, it was about the same design over there. The M models, they come with a different mounting hardware for rear caliper, and also rear caliper with two pistons, like a proper one. The master cylinder is also Brembo, and this is Brembo. Yeah, this is like the worst possible Brembo you can get nowadays for the rear. And the master cylinder is also Brembo, but it's also old-fashioned design, which requires separate reservoir for brake fluid. All like normal modern bikes are using integrated reservoir, and more modern master cylinders, and as I mentioned, two piston brake calipers. But BMW only install those on the on the M model, like M1000RR. I think it used to be like an upgrade kit available for these bikes, but now it's no longer could be found. That upgrade kit would actually inverse this mounting hardware, so the caliper would be mounted below the swing arm as on M version. And yeah, that kit included the rear two-cylinder caliper, but now it's not available. But well, what can you do? This is what we decided to do. I think this is again dumb idea. The bikes, even Aprilia nowadays, which is much cheaper than this motorcycle, it comes with a proper Brembo Stilemas, Brembo front master cylinder, really good Brembo rear master cylinder, and two piston rear caliper. Well, so that's like minus 200 points from Slytherin to BMW. We're definitely in a Slytherin, not in a Gryffindor, I think, by looking at what we're doing actually. Well, anyway, these are brakes. In terms of the performance, brakes are fine. Probably not the best available, but kind of works, thanks to electronics for the ABS, which are freaking great. All of that fine-tuning we did really well for the brakes, so braking performance because of that is great. Good. Yeah, I guess very good. Not great maybe, but very good. Also, I think the compound for the brake pads are also kind of fine, so I don't feel what I need to change something. It kind of works, so fine, let it be. Also, if you would have, if these bikes may come with cast aluminum wheels, as I have here, or forged wheels, or wheel rims, I mean, and carbon fiber wheel rims. The carbon fiber wheel rims, they break with the time, they crack actually. First of all, they crack and then probably break, but when you have cracks, you need to, talk to your BMW dealer representative, and then they will replace it by the warranty. However, as soon as you're out of a warranty, those carbon fiber rims will become like a danger zone, because you need to, in case they crack, you need to buy them, and they are really expensive, isn't it? Especially if you buy original from the BMW, like not through some, you know, shady reseller. In any case, what I'm trying to say is the best option for this motorcycle, if you're buying it new, to get it with forged rims, a bit more expensive, but it's worth it. Also, on the forged rims, the front brake and the carbon fiber rims, the front brake discs are different hardware. The mounting points are different, and they are just generically better. So probably would result in a better performance and less overheating than these ones on the cast aluminum rims. That's what I wanted to say. That's what else. Yeah, let's talk about the DDC suspension now. So this motorcycle equipped with a DDC, and so what I found is, well, a couple of negative things, I believe, and some positives as well. So the positive thing in general about this new variation of a DDC suspension, comparing to 2018 model year, which I have had before, this actually works much better. So you don't really have like a wheel to throw it away immediately. You need to ride for some time before you throw it away, or you want to. The conclusion there is the following. So if you actually know what you're doing in terms of a suspension adjustment, then you better have the bike on a standard manual suspension, mechanical. If you don't know what you're doing and you don't want to take that into account, and you're not looking for the best performance on a track, then you can go with this DDC suspension, and it will work okay-ish in most of the situations. However, it has its own, so that's kind of a positive part about it. So it has a negative side to it as well. So negative side is what in the race pro modes, where the suspension is adjustable, the base setting is very hard, very harsh, and it's very harsh for high speed compression and rebound. So even if you set it to, let's say, 1 on the adjuster, it will actually affect only very, very low speed compression, and like 1 for rebound, 1 for compression. It would affect only like that slow rebound and compression, and the speed of that is detected through the sensors. So the feel is like the lower you set it, let's say if you set all the settings on a DDC adjustment in the race pro mode, all the settings to 1, the bike will be less stable, but you're still gonna get punished when you hit a bigger bumps at a high speed. Like riding, let's say, outside of a city at the high speeds, on the country roads and things like that. Well, on the countryside, of course on the paved roads. Yeah, there may be like a tree root somewhere under the asphalt that created some little bump line, you know, and you hit that at a high speed, and front deflects and the rear just hits you in the butt so hard that the rear wheel will be in the air. Because suspension is not because it's blowing through a suspension stroke, no, I did check for that. It actually kind of allows it to compress a little bit, and when it stiffens to the max, and it feels like a hydro lock basically, which is not great. Obviously, race pro modes were designed for this bike to be ridden on a track, and on a track you won't have these situations happening because it's kind of controllably smooth surface. Well, if you're not talking about like Lithuanian racetrack, Nemuno-Žiedas, in where you definitely need softer settings on this. That's probably good for riding on a GS adventure bike there, but well, at least last time when I was doing track days and where it was like that. But yeah, on a good racetrack, the race pro modes would work. However, the usability for not ideal asphalt conditions of it are quite limited, because you will get punished, you know, on a bigger bumps because of a reaction of a suspension to those bigger bumps. So it's kind of locks when it detects like a fast wheel movement up, it will lock it too much, and then, you know, without using all the suspension stroke, you're gonna get hit in, you know, through that closed valve, which is causing hydrolock, I guess. Another thing that I noticed, if you're riding really fast on the bike, like close to 300 kilometers an hour, suspension stiffens up as well in the, let's say, dynamic mode, and you can feel every freaking little bump on the road, which is completely opposite to what normal suspension, standard suspension would do. Because usually, if, let's say, a super sport bike could feel like really quite hard, you know, at the low speeds, as soon as you go above 200 kilometers an hour, it kind of loosens up, and then you could just drive it as a, you know, as very comfortable bike, you know, because suspension now getting enough load to actually work properly. So on this one, it kind of keeps stiffening it up with a speed increase in a dynamic mode, for example, and yeah, you can feel every little bump. It's not very inspiring per se or comfortable to do, and oh well, again, it's whatever. It's a robot, and BMW programmed it to be like this, so what can you do? So as for the rest of the suspension modes, so it has road, dynamic, and race, and then those adjustable race pro modes. The good thing about what we introduced with this motorcycle is that you can actually use assist menu from the settings menu. There is assist menu, and even if you are in let's say race pro mode at the moment, in race pro 1, you can through this assist menu insert any suspension mode you like into it. So what I ended up doing most of the time, I was riding with race pro 1 mode, which I configured through throttle response and all the rest of the parameters, and then I through assist menu added dynamic suspension mode into it. And to me, the dynamic suspension mode is the only one which feels kind of fine for fast riding, you know, inspired per se riding somewhere, you know, outside of a city with your friends. However, even in that mode, there are some deficiencies which I feel still the rear high-speed compression damping is a bit too harsh, and the front rebound damping is a bit too fast. So on a twist is on a tight turns left to right when you're going on a high speed through them. When you pick up the bike like from a left turn to the right or wherever way around, you can feel the nose kind of goes like that. So it kind of, you know, you can see it kind of rebounding and just falling into a turn, which is again just an indication of too fast rebound damping in the front. But dynamic mode is not adjustable, so you get what you get, and this is how it works, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's the evaluation of DDC. So my plan is to get rid of it. So I'm planning to sell this motorcycle, so we shall see. I mean, if I don't sell it before the start of a season, which is just 2 months away or maybe 1 month away, depending on how the weather will be here. But yeah, if I don't sell it, then I'll try to rip off, well, I will rip off this DDC suspension, and I just need to figure out the best way to get rid of error messages after that. It is sad actually that BMW don't have a menu option on the dash to disable DDC or even through the dealership. So I asked with a local dealership here if they can turn it off, and they requested that from the BMW, and the BMW said no. The computer says no, so they don't care really. Even though it would be really easy for them to do through the coding, you know, to get rid of a DDC. So buying this motorcycle, as I said, if you know what you're doing, just get the normal suspension version, not a DDC version, because otherwise you kind of get stuck with it a little bit. You need to find the ways with the ECU programming or a module from Alpha Racing, which I'm trying right now to discuss, or I'm waiting for an answer from them. Will that work with a 2024 model with a steering angle sensor? Because it might not actually, but we shall see. One way or another I'll find a way to get rid of this DDC if I won't sell this motorcycle before that, before the start of the season. And then there are like huge number of options available for suspension, from the standard for this model, which is really cheap on eBay, to something, you know, proper. Yeah, just more freedom, I guess. So that's about the DDC. No, just few more things about the suspension and the manual for it. So first of all, just simple things like a sag, for example. Sag is the amount of a suspension compression from a fully extended suspension, like the wheel is in the air and pushed down, to the bike on its own weight. So that's called a free sag. Front and rear can be measured. And then you have a total sag, rider on the bike, and how much it compresses. So BMW tells you that in the rear, in the manual for 2024, it says the rear is supposed to be 30 millimeters and the front supposed to be 35, which is kind of the same numbers. And I would agree that for super sport machine, this is about where you want to be, give or take a few millimeters here and there, but in general that's a good baseline. However, here in Europe at least, all the motorcycles on the showroom floor, they come with a 5 turns of a preload. I mean the DDC versions at least. They come with 5 turns of a preload on a hydraulic rear shock preload adjuster, and 4 turns on a turns in all the time, obviously, from full soft. 4 turns in on the on the right fork leg, which is the only place where we have some external adjustments on a DDC bike. And so with my weight, which is around 90 kilograms at the moment, the rear suspension sag measured was way less than 30. It was something like maybe 26 or somewhere around that area. And the front suspension sag, the total one, if we're measuring as they show in the manual, basically the travel of the actual inner fork tube within the outer fork tube, like that is what they display as the measurement points in the manual, user manual for a motorcycle. So front was at 40 when with me on a motorcycle. So rear had too much of a preload and the front too little. And so I tried to get it to 35 millimeters as way. So rear I could get it to 30 millimeters by taking out 3 turns of a preload out of 5, right? So I only have 2 turns on the preload adjuster right now, and my weight, as I said, is 90 kilos, so that's, you know, that shows what, you know, the spring through the linkage is quite on like a hard side, quite stiff. But the front, to get to 35 millimeters measured by like along the length of this inner tube, to get to that I had to add like 13 turns in of a preload in the front, and that wasn't really reasonable at all, because, well, that's about pretty, well, not exactly, but that's close to the maximum number of turns you can do where, I don't recall, the maximum is like 16 maybe, or 15, something like that, but it's, yeah, kind of close to the maximum. And usually that's an indication of rear soft fork springs. Not great, again. And then I was thinking, okay, so this probably, maybe I'm doing something wrong, maybe we wrote that in the manual in some wrong way. And when I decided to check, like, using the forks angle, yeah, so this travel over here would not be equal to a vertical travel of a motorcycle. So this will be always more than this, because this is kind of, you can build like a right triangle in here with right angle. And when this travel will be always more than this vertical one. And when I convert it, and so that 35 millimeters we mentioned in the manual would correspond to something like 39 millimeters of in here. And to get to 39 there out of the 40 we had on the showroom floor, I had to add like 2 turns of a preload and something like that. And so I think right now that they probably actually meant 40 millimeters, but 35 would be just that vertical kind of on the line perpendicular to the ground. On that line, 35, this is what they meant probably. It was pretty much maybe some sort, well, I think some sort of a miscommunications between a technical writer and the engineer, or a test rider, something like that. Because otherwise I don't see much of a point to be setting the rear that hard and leaving the front that soft, per se. In any case, that sort of adjustment, like range, is still within reason, but I would say for the normal, like hard racing, you would still want to have 35 along this tube actually, not into the perpendicular to the ground of a sack. But as I said, on these forks, if you set it into that position when it's almost all the preload for my weight, and also in that case the DDC would be actually quite confused. So that's the thing, when you have a DDC suspension, you need to kind of make adjustments for you and for DDC to be kind of reasonable for both of you, right? For you and for the bike. Because if you think like, oh, I just have 35 millimeters along this inner fork length, inner fork tube, sorry, then the DDC would not understand that. And because, as I mentioned, the rebound damping is quite fast on this bike in the dynamic mode, for example. If you add that much of a preload, the front would be just freaking jumping up everywhere on transitions. So, well, I guess the reasonable range is pretty much like from whatever baseline of a 4 turns in we had, probably like up to maybe 7 turns in. That's where you want to stop, because otherwise I don't know how much you should wait to kind of like make that rebound not to push you back on a higher preload settings. In any case, my setting in the front right now 6 turns in, so 2 more than standard, and the rear is 2 turns in, and that is 3 less than the standard. And this is how I got, in a normal terms, like how the normal people would measure. That would be 39 millimeters of a sag in the front and 30 millimeters of a sag in the rear, measured from the rear axle straight up to the fairing. Yeah, so that's weird, but well, this is how it is. Another kind of a weird thing about, well, related to bike, is how it is pre-adjusted, let's say, from the factory for different sizes of a rear tire. So, as I mentioned already, you have 3 options of rims on this bike from the factory: carbon fiber, forged aluminum, and cast aluminum. So this bike came with a cast aluminum wheels, And in this option you will have from the factory 190 by 55 size of a rear tire. 190 by 55 R17. For cast aluminum wheels and for carbon fiber wheels, it will come from the factory with 200 by 55 R17 rear tire. And 200 by 55 rear tire is 5.5 on average, 5.5 millimeters. It has a radius larger 190 by 55 by 5.5 millimeters on average. So that means that if you have a bike, so this S1000RR model year, let's say 2024 or whatever, with a forged rims or cast aluminum wheels, when the rear of a bike would be higher by 5.5 millimeters on average. So that is actually changing. That is quite substantial difference for a super sport bike like this. That would also mean that you now need to account for all of this change for the whole bike, right? Because if you, let's say, another thing what I noticed is, I think, based on all the logic here, I think these bikes are, where to start untangling this? Right, so let's say this. So okay, so we already established two different sizes of a rear tire, but only one setup for the bike. So if you look at the motorcycle with a 200 by 55 rear, and when you look at the swing arm pivot position, which is right here, it's adjustable, so it kind of turns and it has 3 positions on this motorcycle. And then there is adjustable link as well in the suspension. On this model years, we all have adjustable linkage, which is great. You can see it right where. Right where. It's adjustable linkage. And you can move motorcycle up and down on the forks as well. Right, so these are 3 adjustment points you have. And so bikes which are sitting on a showroom floor, doesn't matter what kind of rear tire we have exactly the same adjustments everywhere else. The same forks position, which is 1.5 millimeter of a golden tube showing above top triple clamp. So the bike is raised quite high on the forks, and then we have the same pivot position for the swing arm, and we have the same gap in the linkage. And so in the manual it's all the same, so it says, okay, if you have a swing arm pivot position up, facing up, like it is from the factory, when your gap between the ends of that linkage is supposed to be 9.5 millimeters. It's all in the freaking manual, you can check it. So, and that is not how it's supposed to be. So if you have, let's say, and this is why I think it's for 200 by 55, because the front is raised that much up on the forks. Because imagine a bike with the same motorcycle, right? And you replace the rear tire from 200 by 55 to 190 by 55. Now you're losing 5.5 millimeters in the rear, so the rear sits lower. Swing arm angle increases automatically, because if you drop here, when this drops but less, right, so swing arm angle will be steeper. And what happens to the forks? Okay, the angle will increase. So the whole steering and anti-squat characteristics with the same of the rest setup, just changing the rear tire will change. So this is not right. So this is something what BMW should be thinking about and fixing. But they somehow, every time they manage to ignore these problems, and this just points to lack of competence or knowledge, or maybe we just don't care, which is even worse. But yes, somebody needs to look into these things, and you cannot allow this to be happening. To my understanding, if it was set up for 200 by 55 rear tire, the whole geometry, how we release it from the factory, and so if you have still selling the option with 190 by 55 rear, when you need to drop the front by the same, on average, 5.5 millimeters to get at least the bike to steer in the same way and have the same anti-squat characteristics as the one with a 200 by 55 rear tire. what I noticed when I started to ride this motorcycle, and it was all set from the factory as it's supposed to, but my turn, so it didn't want to turn really well. So to get it to turn, I had to do like a trail braking every time, like brake into the turn, so it would actually kind of behave properly. And that sometimes was annoying. I also checked on the specifications for the desired, let's say, forks angle, and they specify it interestingly from a horizontal plane, and they say it's 66.4 degrees, which is actually in a normal measurement, because normal people, except for BMW, they measure from a vertical plane, they measure this angle, BMW measures this angle from horizontal. So this angle, that would be 23.6. And a bike with stock geometry, how it comes from the showroom floor, is nowhere near that, when it has 190 by 55 rear tire. So what I did to compensate for that, I dropped the front of a bike on the forks, as you can see here. Yeah, so it dropped to the bottom of a second line. That's about 6 millimeters instead of 7, which I should have done, but I did this specifically to get somewhere into the 24 degrees of forks angle. This is what I wanted. So, and the trail is around, like, somewhere around 102 millimeters at the moment, which I think is too much of a trail, but I like it when I don't want to go steeper than 24 degrees of a forks angle, because that feels like weird to me. So I can battle with trail somewhat, but we will come back to that later. So as for the rear, I did one thing to just check how it assembled, because on all the normal factories, the rear of a motorcycle, and I mean the linkage suspension, rear suspension linkage bolts, the shock bolts, and all the rest supposed to be tightened when the swing arm is pushed up. So on this motorcycle from the factory, everything was tightened with a swing arm just hanging on its own weight. And as soon as I loosened all the suspension bolts, the rear dropped. So this point, and I was doing it while the bike was on a side stand, right? And so the rear dropped immediately, but by about 7 millimeters down. So I retightened all the bolts as they supposed to be, because this is how I could simulate the swing arm being pushed up, right? And so I lost about 7.5 millimeters of ride height in the rear. Sorry, 7 millimeters of ride height in the rear, which is not ideal. And now I'm not really sure how the bike was tested by the test riders. Was it tested when it was incorrectly assembled all the time, with a swing arm just hanging down? Because you have a play, like every bolt and a suspension, it has a little bit of a play within, within a shock and so on and so forth. And so if you loosen all these bolts, you can take a swing arm and you can see the play, right? So every manufacturer is supposed to tighten all these bolts when the swing arm is pushed up. So with a time when you get hits into the rear suspension, the angle of the swing arm and all the rest is not changing, because it doesn't have any way to go any further. But now if it's assembled like a BMW did, what could happen with a time, it could actually, little by little come up. And you won't even notice that, and would be wondering what's going on with the handling. Well, in any case, I did that, and then I did some measurements on the geometry of what I got, and I got right now, well, I had to increase the length from 9.5 millimeters of a gap to 11 millimeters of a gap to get into 10.74 degrees of swing arm angle when the bike is sitting like this on its own weight on a sag, which is around 29 millimeters in the front and 13 millimeters in the rear. That's my free sag currently on this motorcycle. And yeah, 10.74 degrees of a swing arm angle, which is kind of fine. A lot of bikes right nowadays come with a 10.5 in the same kind of a free sag conditions. But what I wanted to achieve, I wanted to get closer to 12.7 on a fully extended suspension front and rear. And this is how people used to measure actually forks angle and the swing arm angle as well in old good days. So we used to just hang a motorcycle and put it on the ground only for the wheels just barely touch the ground, without compressing suspension at all, and then we would measure all these angles. So in that sort of a measurement, I'm right now at 12.67 degrees of a swing arm angle, where kind of sweet spot is about 12.7, but it depends on many factors, on the swing arm angle and the position of swing arm pivot in relations to the pinion on the engine and things like that, up and down, back and forth. So it has its kind of, but this is like a starting point, and out of this I can go with a less swing arm angle or a little bit more swing arm angle, while still keeping my, let's say, forks angle like close to 24 degrees, which is where I want it to be. So that's for rear suspension, and yeah, I guess that's yeah. So about the front suspension, interesting things is what let's talk about what BMW did wrong with this bike. If you remember, on the 2019 model years, 2020, we had really pretty top triple clamps on these bikes, and those were like, well, basically just different ones. But the difference was not just in the top triple clamp. The difference is in the whole triple tree, unfortunately. So what is important about the whole with triple trees is offset from the line which could be drawn, imaginary line between the center of left fork leg and the right fork leg, and then out of that you measure the distance to this center, to the center of axis around which the whole steering is turning, right? So from the center here to that imaginary line, it used to be on the 2019-2020 model year bikes, for sure it was 29.5 millimeters, and pretty much this is where you want to be for the ideal ratio between rake or forks angle and a trail. So that around 30-29 is where you really want to be on a super sport motorcycle like this. And when the forks angle is supposed to be somewhere ideally between 24 and 24.5, but 24 is preferable with around 30 or 29.5 millimeters of offset of a forks forward. So as I said, this bike in the setup I have currently with, I think, kind of a proper swing arm angle, it has 24 degrees of rake or swing or forks angle. But unfortunately, they changed the offset on this newer triple trees to 26.5 millimeters, which basically now creates way too much of a trail for the proper rake which it has at the moment. And I was thinking, okay, I can probably get it into a sweet spot, but so this is the change what we shouldn't have done, but we did, right? Another change we did with those earlier models. So earlier models we had 23.1 degrees of forks angle, which was too steep. And again, I'm not sure how BMW measures it. So they say on this bike it should be 23.6, but it's actually 24. So I guess if that bike was 23.1, that's in reality like 23.5, but still too steep. But it had the right ratio, so it had the right offset of a forks forward. So I was thinking, okay, if I maybe can get a triple tree from 2019-2020 model year and install it here, and I would be fine. I would have exactly like 98 millimeters of a trail with 24 degrees of a rake, and that is just freaking perfect, ideal for a bike like this. Unfortunately, I cannot do that because of this steering angle sensor. As you can see, it's mounted to a bottom triple clamp, and those triple trees from 2019, 2020, they don't have this mounting point in there. And so I kind of doomed to have too much of a trail now and live with it. But well, what can you do? Well, I really hope that BMW at some point will fix the assembly line, so I would tighten all the bolts when the swing arm is actually pushed up, and they will come back to like 29.5 or 30 millimeters of a forks offset forward, and keep, let's say, 24 degrees of an angle on the motorcycle on its own sack, and that would create freaking great handling. And that's one of the things which would, I don't know, which would set it, at least for the front handling, into the best of the best currently available on the market. As for the rear, oh well, one of the changes again on the 23-24, so we introduced the longer chain, so 2 links more than the previous models, and we swapped the rear sprocket to 46 tooth instead of 45. So this altogether moved the rear axle back by 12 millimeters comparing to what it was before, because motorcycles before 2023 they had 120 links chain, I think, and 45 tooth rear sprocket. So yeah, so 12 millimeters comparing to those, so motorcycle became longer, probably more, well, I don't know, it just became longer, different weight distribution, more weight to the front. Probably that is partially the reason for that kind of interesting sag in the front, if they didn't change the springs in the front, and yeah, that could have been part of it. But again, for 200 rear tire by 55 rear tire, this change could have been like making sense, but for 190 by 55, 45 tooth rear sprocket would be better choice in my opinion, and that would allow for shorter chain by 2 links. Like basically, this would be possible to revert back to whatever to pre-2024 changes, and get a motorcycle a bit shorter by with 12 millimeters, and that would, I guess, with 190 by 55 rear tire would positively influence all the rest, because you could probably drop the rear a little bit more, keeping the same swing arm angle, because you can see this is horizontal kind of adjustment type, and so in that case, when the rear axle would move forward, that would create a steeper angle, so you can actually decrease the height of this adjustable link and decrease the height in the rear as well, while keeping the same, let's say, up to 12.7 on fully extended front and rear suspension swing arm angle. And that would allow also to drop the front a little bit more down, and that would create even lower center of gravity. So just all the positive changes while keeping, let's say, 24 degrees of a rake or or forks angle. Maybe it's worth to do that. Another option is to go with a 200 by 55 rear tire, but I really see no reason for that unless you like a super sport racer or some sort. It's more like a bling bling thing to me. 190 by 55 for this motorcycle is good enough for sure. Well, at least it seems to me like that. 200 by 55, it's more like just a wannabe Rossi kind of a thing. Yeah, so these are the things. Again, I wish somebody from BMW would watch this freaking 1 hour long video. Or maybe I need to record another one with just changes, and call it how to make the current S1000RR perfect with little changes like this. Well, front 333 wouldn't be a little change, but still. Now let's talk about some bigger deficiencies per se, which cannot be easily fixed. Well, one cannot be easily fixed, another can. As I mentioned, this motorcycle has adjustable swing arm pivot inserts, and these inserts we have three positions from the factory: 2 millimeters up, which can be then adjusted to 2 millimeters to the back, and then 2 millimeters down. So vertical adjustment range is 4 millimeters. So this position, when you turn it, right, and when it's facing 2 millimeters to the back, it doesn't have any sense whatsoever. It just it's useless. 4 millimeters down may be useful in case you have some interesting, let's say, sprocket setup for whatever squat, anti-squat, fine tuning, where you run, let's say, front as like a 16 and a rear something like 44 maybe, because I think with a standard swing arm chain slider you cannot go below 44, otherwise in this area the chain would be rubbing into the slider quite hard with like 43 for example, but 44 would be still okay. So potentially this bike can run with 16 by 44, maybe 15 by 44, quite alright if you move a swing arm pivot down by 4 millimeters. And that would create interesting, as I said, squat anti-squat characteristics, more like old day MotoGP bikes had. In any case, in my opinion, what would be actually required on this motorcycle, taking in account what we're keeping with 17 by 45 or 46 setup, is to have the swing arm pivot is actually having like 3 millimeters offset, not 2, and it would be actually positioned like 30 degrees forward and up like that. So 30 degrees, 30, from center into here. I think that would make more sense in terms of a swing arm progressiveness, like how the linkage works, and keeping all the things tight and nice. So almost forward 3 millimeters, but a little bit up. And I think in that case, even though swing arm is quite close there to the engine block, it would still not be rubbing it. And here we come to the major problem, which cannot be solved without major modifications to the engine design, maybe for the next model. And it was like a disease of S1000RRs for a very long time, and nobody addressed it actually. So on this motorcycle, as well as on the previous S1000RRs, despite the different engine, it is impossible to move the swing arm pivot closer to the front pinion, because the back of the engine is really like protruding to the rear. In reality, this swing arm pivot should be sitting somewhere here, right? So it's about 2 centimeters closer to the pinion when it is right now, and that would sort out a lot of things which S1000RRs usually have in the rear, and we really suffer from those. BMW trying to battle them through the different means, but yeah, it's still there. So yeah, BMW, if you're listening, next time you do engine design, make sure that your back of the engine is not protruding too much to the rear, so you can move the pinion. So you can move the swing arm pivot point closer to the pinion gear. I mean the front sprocket, otherwise you can call it that. Yeah, about 2 centimeters forward would be ideal. Even 1 would be a major difference already. So you could create much better anti-squat characteristics and potentially use much less of a swing arm angle as well. Yeah, so that's kind of a review. Let me think for a second if I missed anything, or that's about it. Yeah, I already discussed my setup, SAC and the behavior of a DDC, and the plans to remove a DDC if only if possible. deficiencies of a DDC, advantages of a DDC, riding modes, yeah, all of that. Some upgrades, rims, brakes, yeah. Well, I guess I maybe missed some of the points. I didn't talk about them because I don't think they are really important. I guess whatever I didn't mention is just okay. It just works. So don't worry about it. It will be fine, kind of a situation. So in general, this motorcycle is fine. It's not bad or anything like that. It's fine. However, with some changes which I just described, it could be made into much better handling machine. Especially the front is like 2 + 2 = 4. Nobody, I have no, how to say, as hard as I try, I cannot understand why we had to change the forward forks offset to 26.5 millimeters from 29.5, which is great. It was great already. Only thing what we had to do is to change the angle, which we did, and it kind of resulted into the right parameters, so it's not actually 23.6, unless a BMW could explain, but they don't on how they measure it. But the real kind of situation, it's easy to get it to 24 degrees of a rake. The only thing you need is just a different offset of like 29 or 30, and you just right there in the ballpark for the trail. Yeah. Anything else? Well, I don't know. Yeah, I also mentioned that it would be nice to have an option to disable the freaking DDC from the dash, like you do with RDC sensors, for example. Just uncheck the option and you put Ochlins in and just be happy, or whatever else, Nitron, WP, whatever you prefer, you know. Because, well, it shouldn't be like if you bought a DDC bike, you kind of stuck with it, like you in prison, you know. It should not be like that. That's my bike. I wish I could do anything I want with it, isn't it? And they kind of enforce this limitation on you or me. It's not, well, it's not right. It doesn't feel right to me. And again, for them to change your freaking vehicle order, that would be easy. It's as easy as nothing, basically. Like programmatically change the vehicle order and convert it into a standard suspension model. That would be just like 2 buttons click, basically. That's it. But again, they just don't do it for God knows whatever, because they just don't care, I guess. BMW, they don't care, as always. Yeah, those are sad parts. So better brakes, yeah, better hardware, not like that. Not better brake performance, just give us better hardware so we would be happy, especially in the rear, but the front too. Brembo's dilemmas or something better would be great. Yeah, but those are minor, let's say, comparing to the geometry changes and comparing to this DDC replacement per se. This breaks some like the list of concerns, I guess, because these are quite kind of works for the road. Yeah. Oh well. Is that about it? So quick shifter works. Riding modes configurable for in-race pro modes. Yeah. Mirrors are blurry because of vibrations on some RPMs. Wind protection is okay. Riding position is okay. Yeah. Yeah. Swing arm pivots needs to be rethought, because we have one position which doesn't make any sense, but we don't have a position the other way around which would make the sense. But we again don't do it because we don't freaking care for some reason. 1 hour 9 minutes. I think that's pretty much it, guys. I'm tired and I wanna go sleep. So thanks a lot for watching. If you have questions, post them in the comments below. I will also have this like a Bitcoin public key down there in the description, So please support me with some $1 or $2. I will be really happy, because my channel is demonetized and I'm not getting any money for it. So, and I kind of need money, as we all do nowadays. So if you find whatever information I provided helpful, which could help you to choose a motorcycle for yourself, please, just, few pennies would be great. Well, thank you very much for watching, and have a great whatever time of the day you have, and ride safe, and bye.